Hi everyone, my name is Joey and I'm a mixed media artist in California.
In my last video, I walked you around the studio and showed you how I organize my art supplies. I had mentioned that I make my own drawer organizers, so today I'm going to show you how I make them. By making my own organizers instead of buying commercially available solutions, I am able to maximize drawer space and create any layout I want in the drawer. Before I start building any boxes, I make a plan for each drawer. First, I take note of the dimensions of the drawer and any limitations it may have. Then I decide what items to put in the drawer and how these items are going to be laid out. Let's take a look at an example. Here are the measurements of the long Alex drawers in the studio. The drawers don't open all the way, so I made a note of how far they actually open. This is important because it limits what I put in the back of each drawer, knowing that it may not be easily accessible. In one of the drawers, I wanted to store my supply of paints in tubes, specifically my supply of acrylics, watercolors, and gouache. And then I also have several paint palettes that I wanted to include in the drawer if possible. So after I've decided what I want in the drawer, I then sketch a simple layout on paper like I have here. Now I'm thinking I'll use the whole open area for my paints and the back hidden area for the paint palettes. Then if I divide the paint area into 4 partitions, I can have 2 slots for acrylic since they are almost double the size of the other paint tubes, 1 slot for watercolor, and 1 slot for gouache. Making a plan for the drawer serves 2 purposes. It provides a visual map of where things are going to go, and it helps me figure out the dimensions of each partition, so I know what box sizes I need, and to make sure that before I make the boxes, each area in the drawer is large enough to fit the items intended for it. So here's a look at the completed drawer with its custom-made boxes. And at the back, the paint palettes fit perfectly. I don't need to access this often, that's why I don't mind having them in the back of the drawer.
You can create custom organizers for any drawer in your house, and having a plan will prove all the more useful the more complicated the layout gets. Let me give you another example. This time I'm sharing one of the cutlery drawers in my kitchen.
So for this particular drawer, I wanted to store the following: dinner spoons, dinner forks, dinner knives, teaspoons, dessert forks, reusable straws, reusable boba straws, and chopsticks. The drawer is 17.5 by 11.5 inches. I measured each unique item I wanted to put in the drawer to determine the minimum box size that each item required. For the chopsticks, since they're skinny, the width of their box is more flexible than the others. So I left it blank in the beginning, and its value was determined after I found a place for everything in the drawer. And then, kinda like working with puzzle pieces, I started figuring out the best layout for the drawer. Looking at my list, I saw that the boxes for the dinner forks, dinner knives, boba straws, and chopsticks all had the same height. So I placed 2 of them on one end and the other 2 on the other end. Then in the middle, I placed the boxes for the dinner spoons, dessert forks, and teaspoons. And then I figured I can place a small box here below the shorter boxes for miscellaneous items. And then below this whole grouping is where I placed the box of regular reusable straws. Since there were still additional spaces in the drawer, I decided to use the space above to store my second set of cutlery, which I use as backup. And then the space below I divided into 2 compartments. One to store some of the items I use for serving, and a smaller area to store some binder clips that I use in the kitchen. So here you can see that even when you start with a list of things you want to put in a drawer, the list may change as you plan for the drawer. And here's the drawer with its custom-made boxes. I'm really happy with how it turned out, and none of the commercially available drawer inserts that I've found will allow me to store all these items as efficiently as what I've done here. And it's been over a year since I made these boxes, and they've held up pretty well. So I'm taking the time to show you some examples and explain some of my thought process in hopes that it may help you conceptualize your own drawer organizers.
Once you have a plan for your drawer and figured out what box sizes you'll need, you can start making your boxes. The list of materials you'll need is posted in the description box.
The main material you'll need is chipboard, which is the same as non-corrugated cardboard. And here are some samples. What I use is 50-point heavyweight chipboard, which has a thickness of approximately 1/16 of an inch. You can find this in art supply stores or shipping supply stores. I prefer heavyweight chipboard, but you can also use lightweight chipboard like recycled cereal boxes. How much chipboard you'll need will depend on the sizes of your boxes and how many you're making. You'll also need decorative paper like scrapbook paper or wrapping paper to give your boxes a nice finish. I'm using double-sided paper, and for visual interest, I'm going to use one side for the inside of the box and the other side for the outside of the box. For this demo, I'm making a box that is 4 inches long by 3 inches wide by 2 inches high. Of course, when you're making your boxes, you'll have to adjust the dimensions according to your needs. And again, the thickness of the chipboard I'm using is about 1/16 of an inch. So first step is to outline the different parts of the box on the heavyweight chipboard using a pencil and ruler. If you're using lightweight chipboard, you'll have to do things a little bit differently, which I will show later in the video. For the parts of the box, you'll need a base measuring length times width, which in my case is 4 inches by 3 inches, 2 long sides, each measuring length times height, which in my case is 4 inches by 2 inches, and 2 short sides. Now, because the long sides are going to be attached on top of the base, the length of the short sides needs to be 3 inches minus the thickness of the 2 long sides. So the short sides will measure 2 7/8 inches by 2 inches. Here's my chipboard with the base, the 2 long sides, and the 2 short sides drawn on it. The next step is to cut out the pieces using a utility knife and glue one side of each piece onto decorative paper using a glue stick. The finished sides will be the interior of the box. Now, if you want to be more efficient, especially if you're doing multiple boxes, I suggest you draw the parts of the box, cut out the excess areas, and then glue the whole piece on the decorative paper before you cut the individual parts. When you're cutting your chipboard, make sure you use a self-healing cutting mat to protect your work surface. And for heavyweight chipboard, you may have to run your knife along a line a few times to cut it completely. So here are the different pieces of my box. The next step is to glue the sides to the base. We will attach the sides to the top of the base as shown here and not to the edge of the base. For glue, I'm using tacky glue, which is thicker than regular white glue, so it has more grabbing power to hold items in place while the glue is drying. If you don't have tacky glue, you can use any all-purpose white glue. And then to protect my work surface when I'm gluing, I use this non-stick craft mat. If you don't have one, you can use wax paper or even just any scrap paper. Starting with one long side, apply a strip of glue on one of the long edges, and then place it flat on your table with the finished side facing up. Then take your base and attach the finished side to the edge of your side piece. Push the two pieces together using the flat surface of the table to make sure that they are flush with each other. Hold the two pieces together for a few seconds to let the glue set. And then let these attached pieces stand on its short edge while you apply glue on the next piece. Attach the other long side to the base in the same way. For the short sides, apply glue on all the edges except for the top edge before attaching them to the base. Now that the box is assembled, we will wrap it in decorative paper. This serves two purposes. It will give the box a nice finished look, and it will reinforce the glued edges to make the box stronger. Since I used this side for the inside of the box, I will use this other side for the outside. When I'm cutting the paper to size, I like to leave a 1/2 inch margin around the edges to fold on the inside. So here I've marked 2 of the side margins using a pen so you can see more clearly. Then instead of using the ruler for measuring, I just use the box as a guide to mark where else I need to cut and fold. After marking the paper, it's time to wrap the box. And here's the completed box. If you're using lightweight chipboard, the dimensions of your base and long sides remain the same. As for the short sides, you don't have to subtract the thickness of the chipboard. So for the 4x3x2 box that I'm making, the short sides will each measure 3 inches by 2 inches. You can cut the base and sides separately, or if the box you're making is small enough, you can cut the base with the sides attached to it already like I have here. With my glue stick, I'm going to attach one side of this whole piece on the decorative paper. The next step is to assemble the box using masking tape. Make sure you use the finished side as the interior of the box. And then the last step is to wrap the box in decorative paper. Like I mentioned before, it will give the box a nice finished look, and it will reinforce the glued edges to make the box stronger. And here's the completed box. To make the most of my resources, I like to glue scrap pieces of chipboard together and then use that to make my boxes. I don't worry about these chipboards being weaker since I'm reinforcing them with decorative paper. The same goes with the decorative paper. To avoid being wasteful, I don't mind gluing two scrap pieces together and then using that to wrap a box. So when I'm gluing chipboards together, I use tacky glue, and when I'm gluing decorative paper together, I use a glue stick.
And that's it for today's video. I hope you learned something new and that I was able to give you some ideas on how you can organize your own drawers. Thanks for watching.